Good morning. On behalf of the faculty, staff, and students of the College of Law and her family, I welcome you to this memorial service for Professor Beth Eisler. We gather here with Beth's family and friends to remember her as a professor, dean, mentor, colleague, and friend, and as a daughter, sister, wife, mother, and grandmother. I know many of you here knew her as Professor Eisler or Dean Eisler, but I have to call her just Beth, as I have for over 25 years. It is a tribute to who Beth was that there are so many people here today, and that so many family and friends from around the country are in attendance. This number includes former faculty colleagues who have come from out of town, and many students, past and present. Beth spent a lot of time in this room. She used to sit up there in the balcony during talks by our guest speakers, often with an attentive but quizzical look on her face, making one wonder what she thought. I hope she is here with us in spirit. I could not have imagined this day even 5 months ago. Beth's illness and death came as a shock to all of us, and it still is. We lost her too soon, too unexpectedly, and too suddenly. But we will remember her as the vibrant, good-natured, accomplished, and caring person she was. We're going to combine remembrances of Beth with a religious service, and after this introduction, I'm going to turn things over to Associate Dean Lee Pizzamenti, Beth's good friend, to speak and to introduce the other participants. Because she was such an important part of the College of Law, and the College of Law was so important to her, I would like to focus my remarks on her professional achievements and contributions. Beth came to the law school in 1987, first as a visiting professor, and then joined the faculty permanently 2 years later. She had earlier taught for 7 years at Wayne State University Law School in Detroit after a stint with the U.S. Justice Department. In the course of her career, she taught sales, secured transactions, legislative drafting, and trust and estates. But her major courses were evidence and contracts, a first-year course. She was popular, and her courses were popular. Many years, Beth taught the most students of anyone in the building. You'll hear more about her teaching and what she meant to her students later. Beth received the Outstanding Professor Award from the College of Law graduating class on 3 separate occasions, and the last 2 years received the university's Student Impact Award, voted by her students. She also taught at the University of Szeged in Hungary as part of our relationship with that school, and the dean there has sent his expressions of sympathy and praise for her teaching. Beth served twice as Associate Dean for Academic Affairs at the College of Law, in 1993 to 95 with Dean Jim Klein, and in 1999 to 2005 with Dean Phil Closius. In that position, she was involved in innovations to our program that continue today. To name just a few, certificates of concentration in certain specialized subject areas, 60 minutes of class for each credit hour, rather than the standard 50. Bar exam type questions on our final exams. And yes, students, our mandatory attendance policy and sign-in sheets. As her family and colleagues know, she spent long hours at the office, on top of the drive from her home in Ann Arbor. Beth served as interim dean in the 2005-2006 academic year. She did her usual thoughtful, hardworking, and effective job. Since becoming dean, I have come to appreciate even more the diplomacy with which she interacted with the law school's many constituents. After leaving administration, Beth did not stop helping to run the school, most especially as chair of the Faculty Hiring Committee, the Promotion and Tenure Committee, and the Strategic Planning Committees. Many of our outstanding professors at this law school are here thanks to Beth's good judgment and her efforts. Just last spring, I asked her to take on an additional job as chair of the law school's self-study committee in preparation for the regular accreditation inspection this fall. and as usual, she agreed. We learned what a central role Beth played at the law school after her medical leave this fall, when we had to replace her on her committee assignments and in her courses. It wasn't easy. I am proud to say, though, that our faculty stepped forward without hesitation to help out, in part from their love for Beth. This would be a very different and not nearly as good law school had Beth Eisler not been a part of it. As an administrator and faculty member, she was instrumental in shaping our program and the composition of our faculty. Perhaps most importantly, she helped set the tone of the place, of caring for our colleagues, and most of all, for our students. The friendly, collaborative atmosphere here is pretty rare among law schools, and Beth deserves a lot of the credit. To help keep her memory alive, we are establishing the Beth Eisler Award for First-Year Teaching to be voted on by our students at the end of their first year. Beth enriched the lives of all of us at the College of Law, faculty, staff, students, and graduates. We will not forget her.
Thank you, Dean Steinbach. I'm honored to participate in this service today. Today, we will talk about how lucky we are to have had Beth Eisler in our lives. But before those recollections begin, Rabbi Alan Sakobin will lead the religious portion of our service. Rabbi Sakobin is also one of our graduates, a good friend of Beth's, and has taught Jewish law at the University of Toledo College of Law for many years. Rabbi?
I share these moments of mingled pain and pride by being a part of a religious service. This is the first time in the history of the college, I do believe, that there has been a religious service in this auditorium. And it is here specifically because Beth wanted it. This is what she wanted. She asked me to officiate, to solemnize and celebrate her Jewish expression of love and our expression of loss. Like many, she was not certain with regard to the ancient religious doctrines, but she was fully secure as a part of an ancient people, and she always reflected intense pride in her heritage. 3,000 years ago, one of our ancestors wrote praise for a woman of great gifts. A woman of shining intellect, of vibrant energy, of creativity, of openness of spirit, and warmth of heart. She was a caring, loving, very human being. She was the Beth of that time, because all of these things can be said with regard to Beth. The words come from the book of Proverbs, the last chapter. Tradition says it was written by Solomon, her and my ancestor. A woman of valor, who can find? She is more precious than fine pearls. Her husband trusts in her, and so he lacks nothing. She does him good and never harm all the days of her life. She perceives that her labor is rewarding. Her candle burns into the night. She reaches out to those in need and extends her hands to the poor. She is clothed in strength and dignity. and she faces the future cheerfully. She speaks with wisdom. The law of kindness is on her lips. Her children rise up and bless her. Her husband sings her praises. Many daughters have done valiantly, but you excelled them all. We turn to our prayer pamphlet, and the italics are for all of us to join together. Esa inai el heharim me'ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shemayim va'aretz. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help will come from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. Hayiten lamot raglecha, al yanum shomrecha. He will not allow your foot to slip. Your guardian will not slumber. Hinei lo yanum v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha al yad yeminecha. Behold, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. The Eternal is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. Yomam hashemesh lo yechaka, v'yarech b'layla. Adonai yishmarcha mikol ra, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzeitecha avuecha me'etav yarolam. The sun shall not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will guard you from all evil. He will protect your being. The Lord will guard you coming and going, from this time forth and forever. As in the world around us, so too in human life. Darkness is followed by light, and sorrow by comfort. Life and death are twins. Grief and hope walk hand in hand. Although we cannot know what lies beyond the body's death, let us put our trust in the undying Spirit who calls us into life and who abides to all eternity. Lord God of the spirits of all flesh, you are close to the hearts of the sorrowing, to strengthen and to console them with the warmth of your love, and with the assurance that the human spirit is enduring and indestructible. Even as we pray for perfect peace for those whose lives have ended, so do we ask you to give comfort and courage to the living. May the knowledge of your nearness be our strength. For you are with us at all times. This was Beth's favorite, her favorite psalm. Mizmor David, Adonai ro'i lo yichsar. Benot deshe yarbitzeni al mei menuchot yinacholeni. Nafshi yeshovev. Yancheni b'magli tzedek lama'an shemo. Gam ki elech begates al mavet. Lo ira ra. Ki ata imadi. Shiftecha mishantecha hema yenachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged zorai. Tishanta b'shemen roshi. Kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirtefuni kol yemei chayai. V'shafti bebet Adonai la'orech yamim. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for the sake of his name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. The rod and staff you comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Thank you, Rabbi. As we begin our recollections this morning, one question we might have is how Beth might feel about what's going to be said during this service. Part of her wouldn't be comfortable with friends and family talking about her, especially in the glowing terms I feel fairly confident that they will be using. Beth was never the type to talk about herself. It was never about her. She was always curious and concerned about how you were doing. Even when she was quite ill, she would respond to my questions about how she was doing with something like this. It is what it is. How are your kids doing? I can tell everyone in this room at one time or another has probably received similar kind, thoughtful, and unselfish treatment from Beth. So the other part of her would say, fine, do what you need to do. So since I feel I have her permission, I'm very pleased to speak on behalf of my faculty colleagues. But I have to step back just a little bit first. Because before Beth was my friend and my colleague, she was my evidence professor. Now, one day I remember sitting in class when someone came in and robbed a classmate. You might think this was because the law school was in downtown Detroit, but that's not why. We soon learned that this was an event set up by Beth, so we could later conduct a trial in a later class session to test our evidence knowledge. She discontinued that practice. I could only get her to say something about liability reasons. But the point is, Beth was a teacher using new and innovative teaching methods long before using new and innovative teaching methods was cool. Now, Beth was an extraordinary colleague. First, she was wicked smart. And second, as with every aspect of her life, she was willing to share. Colleagues have appreciated her class notes, her ideas for exams, and counseling about how to teach. We learned from her in conversations about doctrine and about legal education generally. But mostly, we just liked having her around. I've received many comments from colleagues, but I thought I would quote a couple. First, Nicole Porter tells a great story. My favorite times with Beth, she says, were serving with her on the appointments committee. As stressful and long as that was, I especially enjoyed being with Beth at the Faculty Hiring Committee conference in Washington, D.C. Beth, the committee chair, was very organized and methodical. She made sure we stocked the room with Diet Coke, her favorite, lots of snacks, and, of course, a very large bottle of Purell. Beth was a little bit of a germaphobe. Now, Beth wanted to make sure that we had time in between candidates, Nicole continues, so she had a way of getting rid of the candidate after about 20 or 25 minutes. Regardless of where we were in the conversation, Beth would just turn to the candidate and say, "We have to let you go." Only Beth could pull that off with such grace and without seeming rude. We always laughed so much. Sometimes at the candidates, after they left the room, of course, and more often at each other. I can't imagine serving on that committee without Beth. It will never be the same. We'll probably end up hungry and crabby and running late. Joe Slater also remembered Beth in her appointments committee role, but from the point of view of a candidate. And I think this is a great story that shows how Beth impacted the newer faculty members who have been here and who went through the faculty recruiting conference when Beth was chair. So this is what Joe says from the point of view of being a candidate. And I want to point out, Joe, she probably laughed at you after you left the room. Actually, she laughed at no member of the faculty who's sitting in this room. It was all people who didn't come back. He said, "I distinctly remember the first time I saw Beth. I was interviewing at the hiring conference in late 1998. It was my last interview of the day, and I had already seen more than my share of blowhards. The moment the Toledo folks opened the door, I saw Beth, laughing with another colleague about something. Soon into the interview, I got the impression that the culture at Toledo was different, serious about being a good law school, but friendly and unpretentious. And I was right. I got that impression in large part because of Beth, and also because the law school really is like that. And the law school is like that because of Beth, in large part. All the things that folks praise her for. being an excellent and dedicated teacher, being supportive to junior colleagues, being a fine administrator, and doing so much service. All are because she wanted to make this a very good school. And she combined high standards with good humor and a lack of pretension. That is all too rare in this business. Jeff Rapp wrote, "There just doesn't seem to be anything I could say in words that would sum up what Beth meant to me personally and professionally. No single story could do her justice, and just thinking about this brings me an immense sense of loss. But to try my best, here's one thing I think everyone who worked with or learned with from Beth would agree with. She had high expectations for her students, for her colleagues, and for the College of Law." He too was reminded of Beth's comments to the faculty candidates, and so he closed his statement with this. "So if there was something that I would say to Beth, it would be this: we have to let you go." While she is gone, she will always remain part of this law school. Lou Gibbons wrote a beautiful tribute to Beth that echoes what many faculty colleagues feel is her mark about this place. In Julius Caesar, Shakespeare wrote, "The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones." Beth is the exception to this truism. The good that she has done will live out in the generations of law students and now lawyers whom she taught and for whom she served as an exemplar. But that is not the limit. They will pass on lessons taught by Beth, student-centric administrator and teacher, and someone who really cared, to their clients and to the lawyers they will mentor. "I should add," he said, "that one of the things I learned from her is that you do not have to settle for the dessert already placed in front of you at Bar Association functions." You can switch desserts. It's appropriate that Lou referred to this because Beth was a great believer in eating dessert first, or perhaps only eating dessert. So I'm proud to have been her colleague, but I'm most grateful that Beth was my friend. The fact is, I sort of want to be Beth Eisler when I grow up. She could look elegant in blue jeans. She had such a strong sense of self. She knew exactly who she was, and she wasn't concerned about the opinions of the crowd. Ira tells me she was like that as a teenager, probably the only teenager who was like that. So Beth was probably born fully formed. She never raised her voice, although maybe Alex will contest that during his talk, I don't know. She had a great poker face. The bottom line, she could navigate any social or professional situation. She also knew what was important. While she was an extraordinary professional, her family came first. She was lucky enough to have had Ira, her best friend, as her spouse. And she was so proud of her children, Maya and Alex, not just because of their accomplishments, which were many. More importantly, because of the warm and loving people that they were. As with her innovative teaching methods, she knew about work-life balance before everybody was talking about work-life balance on Oprah and all those other talk shows. As I said before, she was always thinking about the other person and doing things great and small to show that she cared. I will miss her warmth, her wise counsel, her great sense of humor, and the green and black dot candy she gave me because they weren't her favorite. She was a red and yellow girl. I loved her, I miss her, but I'm very happy that she was in my life. So, I'd now like to ask Judy Cobb, who worked directly with Beth for many years and who seemed to share custody of the Fisher-Eisler family wonder dog, Rocky, to come speak on behalf of the College of Law staff. Judy?
This is a hard act to follow, especially to someone that has never spoken before anyone. I'm doing this because I loved Beth. We are here today to honor a devoted wife, mother, and friend. The fact that I'm standing here is evidence of how much she meant to me. I hope her family finds comfort in the respect, admiration, and affection displayed here today. Beth epitomized everything good about the Law College. In the 25 years I had the pleasure of knowing and working with her, her love and devotion for the law school never wavered. While in the administrative suite, Beth's typical working hours were 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., and the law school is the beneficiary of that dedication and tireless energy. Most of this energy fueled with Diet Coke, trail mix, and along with a few M&Ms. Of course, she kept a huge basket of candy on her desk, which she didn't eat, for faculty, staff, and students. Every month, she would stop by Sam's and stock up on treats. Beth respected all the staff. We were treated like colleagues. You didn't work for Beth, you worked with Beth. Beth's concern for her students knew no bounds. I especially remember an out-of-town first-year student who had lost her luggage, and the bus company couldn't find it. The student had no clothes and very little money for furniture. In a few days, that student had received clothes and some furniture for her apartment. Beth was definitely a force when she wanted to make a point or get something done, but she was every bit that force when she was helping someone. Beth was one of the strongest and most generous individuals I ever knew. She was such a blessing to me after my husband died in my bout with cancer. She was one of those people that once you got to know her, there wasn't anything you couldn't tell her or ask her. And no matter what it was, she would truly be there, whatever the cause or need. Beth was beautiful inside and out. I asked the staff to give me some ideas of what they thought when they thought of Beth. I would like to share some of their answers. Over the years, I had the pleasure of observing, listening, and learning from Beth. She was such an inspiration to me in many ways, as a woman, a mother, and as a mentor in a professional capacity. I looked up to her, and I am truly grateful to have known her. Her door was always open, and she always knew exactly what to say. She was courageous, fair, compassionate, kind, and funny, and had a huge heart. I admired her genuine concern and dedication to the students, faculty, and staff. Her presence will be truly missed. Another staff member wrote, "Make sure you mention Beth bringing in her little dog Rocky, and how we called him the college mascot, and how he cheered everyone up." She was always wore black, kind of Johnny Cash-like. It made her seem strong or powerful. Maybe just again, it was that presence she had like, "I have arrived, now we can get started," sort of thing. Actually, I think it was just easy dressing, not many choices or matching problems. Simple, yet classy. Her laugh was definitely infectious and loud. She had a great voice for speaking and teaching. You couldn't miss when Beth was in the room. She had a wonderful sense of humor and a laugh that just fit her bold, outstanding self. I can remember singing Christmas carols and teaching her about being the most well-versed Jewish gal we ever knew. Those were fun times. I will totally miss her. She was far too young to leave this world, but I truly believe she made it a better place while she was here. Beth was so generous with us. I remember when she brought in all those gift bags of doggy treats for those of you who took Rocky for walks. I always felt that we were safe from the things that happened on campus with the budget cuts. Beth always made the staff feel that they were an important part of the law school. There was that feeling of family and caring. She always had time for us. When I think of Beth, I think of the tremendous positive energy she brought to the suite and the law school. It was a pleasure to work for her each day. I also think she did wonders for our morale. Just the little ways she helped us answering the phones when we all needed to be gone at the same time, letting us all go early occasionally, and doing the small things like handing out exam numbers or taking in grades. It may not have seemed like a big deal, but those little things made all the difference. Since the majority of my contact with Beth occurred during her years as Associate Dean, I think of the moments that demonstrated her exuberance for life. Examples that come to mind include our annual holiday staff luncheons, like the year she exposed us to the Jewish Hanukkah by playing the dreidel game, or when she would lead us in singing traditional Christmas carols, which she confessed as her guilty pleasure. Beth impressed us knowing all the words to lesser-known second and even third stanzas. I know all the tributes expressed here today will be more eloquently spoken, but few will be spoken with more love. We miss you, Beth. You will never be forgotten, dear friend. I am so thankful that you were a part of my life.
Thank you very much, Judy. You're a more eloquent writer than you think you are. That's beautiful. I would now like to ask Brianne DeMoco, a 2012 College of Law graduate and most recent research assistant to Beth, to speak on behalf of both current and former students. Brianne?
Every student is required to take contracts in the first semester of their 1L year. Like many UT Law students, Professor Eisler was my first professor of my first class in law school. After contracts, I had the pleasure of serving as Professor Eisler's teaching assistant, her research assistant. She was the advisor for my law review article, and I had the opportunity and honor to make a presentation with her at a CLE. Needless to say, Professor Eisler was not only my professor, but she quickly became a dear friend and mentor as well. No lawyer will ever forget their first semester in law school, the quirky personalities of their classmates, the panic-stricken fear of getting cold called on a case you neglected to read. And for every UT Law student who had Professor Eisler for Contracts 1, they will never, ever forget Professor Eisler's enthusiasm for teaching. She was incredibly animated and witty. She made an hour-and-a-half discussion on the legal interpretation of the word chicken surprisingly funny and interesting. Most of all, she truly cared about students. In her office, she dedicated whatever amount of time necessary to review practice questions and outlines with students, and she was remarkably patient when responding to students' off-the-wall hypothetical questions, usually with a witty remark in response. Not only did she care about teaching substantive law, but Professor Eisler was genuinely concerned about the students' overall well-being. She always asked about finances and jobs and work-life balance. She was truly concerned about what the students were doing and how they were. After hearing of Professor Eisler's illness, hundreds of former students, colleagues, and friends sent emails and commented on blog posts expressing their sympathies and sharing stories of their experiences with Professor Eisler. Her husband, Ira, shared these comments and memories with her. He noticed that many of the stories shared themes. The first-year students were terrified by Professor Eisler and the Socratic method, and then they learned to appreciate her. Her words continued to echo in their ears for years to come. He indicated that at least 20 students had given her credit for encouraging them to continue their legal education when they were ready to quit. What is true of all of the emails is that Professor Eisler's former students and colleagues all recognized her kindness, her intelligence, her wit, and most of all, her humanity. Several former students thanked Professor Eisler for how she listened and always made time for them, even when they caught her on her way out of the law school. They thanked her for how she never made them feel like she was in a hurry or impatient, and she always helped analyze whatever problem they were having and come to their own conclusions. Finally, they appreciated how she infused her sense of humor, so they always left her office laughing even when they entered her office crying. Albert Pike said, "What we have done for ourselves alone dies with us. What we have done for others and the world remains and is immortal. Professor Eisler has achieved a rare honor. She will be remembered most fondly for her greatest passion in life, teaching and mentoring young professionals. Today, we celebrate Professor Eisler's remarkable contribution to the world and to our lives. We will continue to celebrate Professor Eisler's contributions each day, as she will live on through the thousands of students she's impacted as an educator, a mentor, and a friend. On behalf of the thousands of students who you've impacted over the course of your career, Professor Eisler, we say thank you.
Thank you, Brianne. We'd now like to ask Beth Eisler's son, Alex Fisher, to speak on behalf of his family.
As Lee said, my name is Alexander Fisher, and I'm Beth's son. I'm honored to stand at this podium in the law school where my mom taught so many for so many years. I'd like to thank the law school, Dan Steinbach, Lee Pizzamente, Rabbi Sabokin for making this service possible. You know, we were very worried about how to honor her in a way that wouldn't make her uncomfortable, and I think this is the perfect forum for it. Thank you all for coming here today. It means so much to our family that you're here, and Beth's mother, 94-year-old mother Naomi, and Beth's Aunt Lucille send their love as they're not able to travel. Before I begin speaking about my mom, I have more thank yous to make to the people who have made these very difficult last few months much easier for me. First of all, I'd like to thank my mom's doctors, nurses, and aides who made sure she was comfortable for as long as possible. I'd like to thank all the family and friends who reached out to my father, my sister, and me with offers of support. I'd like to thank my Uncle Arlen and Aunt Jane, who came to visit many times and made it seem like we were on a joyous family vacation rather than huddled around my mom's bed in a hospital room or in hospice. Thank you to my wonderful wife, Tiffany, for chasing around our two young sons when I was in Michigan with my family, and for packing up the boys, bringing our whole life so that they could see their Nana as much as possible, and just being there to listen. I'd like to thank my sister Maya. She dropped everything, left her life in D.C., took a leave from her job, came with her two young daughters so that she could advocate for my mother's care 24/7 and make sure that my mom would never have to be alone. What you did was an amazing thing, very selfless. You're an amazing sister, amazing daughter. I don't know how we would have gotten through this without you. And your relationship with Mom was very special, and I know she got as much, if not more, out of it than you did. Thank you to Maya's husband, Gene, for giving up his family during the week and traveling to Ann Arbor every weekend. And thank you to his mother and father and his sister and his aunt for helping take care of Mirabelle and Nev while they were here. I want to thank my father for being so honest and open with his emotions, both in person and on his blog, but at the same time being incredibly strong. Thank you for showering Mom with love for the last 50 years. Thank you for being a father and worrying about us, even as you were losing your best friend. Your perseverance has been an inspiration, not just to me, but I think to many people here. And my father's not speaking today, mostly because he gets very verklempt. You can see when talking about my mother, he's an emotional guy, and I think his feelings about her, he's already expressed them both on his blog and in person to many of you, so I think there's no doubt as to how he feels about my mom. I also want to thank Beth's grandchildren, my nieces Mirabelle and Nev, and my sons Oliver and Xavier for being the welcome distraction we all needed, and always being able to put a smile on their Nana's face no matter how she was feeling. Thank you all for the wonderful letters and emails you sent telling us how much she meant to you. Many of those came from people who knew her as either Professor Eisler or Dean Eisler. And from what we read, it was touched on before, but I think there would be a lot fewer lawyers if it weren't for my mom. And I'm going to skip the obvious lawyer joke here, mostly because I couldn't figure out how to phrase it, but also because My mom truly loved teaching, and she loved the law, and I think she would be very honored, or she was very honored, because she was able to hear a lot of these thoughts before she passed away, but she's very honored to know that she made such an impact and helped so many people get to where they wanted to be. The theme that kept coming up again and again is that when a student was feeling overwhelmed or seriously considering dropping out of law school, a conversation with Professor Eisler was enough to keep them going. My mom had a way of listening to problems that made them disappear. She always stayed cool, calm, and collected, and had a smile on her face. First, she would validate your concerns, but then she would say, "So what's the worst that can happen?" When my mom was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of thyroid cancer just 4 months ago, we all quickly realized that the worst thing was going to happen, and we would lose her. But throughout it all, she kept her calm and her cool and her smile and her humor. And she mostly refused visitors. It wasn't because she didn't want to see anyone, but because it was her nature to make others feel better about any problem. And she knew she simply didn't have the energy to make other people feel better about this. For any of you who have been reading my father's blog or have known my parents for a long time, you know that they met when they were teenagers and quickly became best friends. You might not know exactly how they ended up together, though. You can ask my dad's friend Buddy some of the details. But when they finally ended up together, Beth was living with a man named Steve Gold, and she went out for dinner with her old friend Ira, who was back in the United States after a long adventure around the world. Unfortunately for Steve Gold, but fortunately for the rest of us, dinner led to a trip to Spain where Ira was going to teach English. She came for a week and stayed for 6 months. So if your girlfriend ever tells you she's just going to dinner to meet her old friend from high school, who happens to be a guy with flowing locks and a killer mustache, it's probably not a good sign for your relationship. My parents came back to the States and moved to Ann Arbor, where Ira was studying linguistics and Beth was starting her teaching career at Wayne State. He'd often wake up in the middle of the night and start packing a bag, as he was not used to being in one place after having traveled for so many years. "Where are you going?" she would ask, half asleep. "I have to get out of here," he'd say. She would go back to sleep knowing he wasn't going anywhere. She was always cool and always calm, and he never went anywhere because she was his best friend, and she was beautiful, and she was caring, and she was smart, and she was funny, and he loved her. So he always stayed put. They started as best friends, and they stayed that way. And they made a great parenting team and showed us an example of a marriage of equals. My dad said he would have turned into a real asshole if it wasn't for her. And I don't think that's true, but I know she did make him a better person, just the way she made us all better. My mom used to say that she was tough as a teacher and that her students were scared of her, and I never believed it. She was so kind and so gentle as a mother, and she was so calm and so cool. And yes, Lee, she did yell at me once, but only once that I can remember. Yeah, it's pretty good. I probably deserved a few more. But even though she was calm and cool, she was so warm and she was so loving. And despite working a full-time job an hour away from home, and as you've heard, being very successful in her career, she never missed any of my events or my sister's events. She was always there. And she might not have had time to cook a meal for the potlucks, but she always ordered pizza, and it was always the most popular dish. So, and even though she wasn't much of a cook, she made my lunch every day, all the way through high school, which is maybe a bit embarrassing looking back on it, but, and during swim season, she would wake up at 5:15 every morning and make me her specialty breakfast of a peanut butter, jelly, and banana sandwich on a hot dog bun, so that I was ready to go before morning practice. When I was 3, I used to say to my sister, "He's your papi, and she's my mommy." And as a father, I now understand that must have been hard to hear from my dad, but she really was the center of my universe, and I didn't feel like I needed anyone else. I used to have trouble sleeping and would oftentimes end up wandering onto my parents' floor in the middle of the night. And she would always hang her hand down over the side of the bed so I could hold it no matter how uncomfortable it was for her. And I used to get really nervous when I couldn't fall asleep. And then one time she just said, "So what's the worst that can happen? You'll be tired tomorrow?" And it never bothered me after that. The first time I remember making her laugh, I felt so good because I had finally done something for her instead of the other way around. And I always enjoyed hearing her laugh, and I got such joy out of seeing my children, Maya's children, making her laugh too. It took me many years to comprehend that there were people that didn't revere their mother the way I revered my mother. I just didn't understand that all mothers weren't like her. And it took me until I was a father to realize that having children doesn't magically make your own needs go away. That her selflessness was not a product of just being a mother and having kids, but it was a product of who she was. You know, I'm angry that my boys and my nieces will not get to grow up with my mom around. And I'm heartbroken that she won't get to see them grow up. And that my parents will not get to grow old together. But any self-pity I have about feeling my mom, about losing my mom, quickly fades away, because I know I was so lucky to have her for as long as I did. And the love that she gave me and all of us will be with us forever. And even though her grandkids won't have her love and guidance as they grow up, I know they will inherit many things from her. From Mirabel and Nev, she gave her beautiful curls. To my son Xavier, not only did she give a little extra piece of skin in his knee, but also her tendency to rock back and forth and hum when she was eating something especially good. And to Oliver, who I think might be sleeping now, she gave her ability to go with the flow and smile no matter what was going on. I hope as her grandchildren age, they display all of her kindness, her generosity, her love of learning, and her humor. My mother cared deeply about other people, but she never cared much what their opinion was about her. She took her responsibilities seriously, whether they be to her family, her friends, her students, or her colleagues, but she never took herself seriously. And my wish for my children is that they can live their lives this way too. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. The rabbi will now lead us in the prayer, the Kaddish.
The last personal word. She was my teacher, a mentor, a friend, a precious colleague. She was a unique human being. She had a quality that I do not see in many, and I wish I had it. That is, she had exceedingly high standards, and at the same time, she was not judgmental. A unique quality. The Kaddish, which is in Aramaic and on the back page of our prayer pamphlet, is not a prayer for the dead or a prayer about the dead. It is a prayer of gratitude for the life. It is a prayer that thanks God for creating human beings who can live and love and contribute and share and touch each other's hands and hearts. It is a simple prayer that is now some 2,000 years old, but speaks to this day and speaks to our gratitude for the days, the many moments, the glorious moments that the family have had, and the many minutes and hours that the rest of us have had with Beth. For this prayer, I would ask that you rise. And for those who know Aramaic, if you would join me. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabbah, b'yarama divrach yirutei v'yamrich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru, Amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevorach le'elam omei omaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal, Shmei Kedusha Berechu, Leila Mikol Birchata V'Shirata, tushbechata v'nechmata, ta'miram berama v'imru, amen. Yehei shlom rabba min shemaya v'chaim, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'imrumav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. And may the source of peace send peace to all who are mourners, and we are all, in some measure, mourners, and comfort to all who are bereaved. And we all say, Amen, Amen. Be seated, please.
Thank you, Rabbi, and thank all of you for being here today. I know that the family is so grateful that so many of you have traveled from near and very, very far. It's a tribute to Beth, and I know the family appreciates it. If you would like to share your recollections of Beth Eisler, we invite you to visit our webpage and do that. I would also like you to invite you to join in the forum for Beth's favorite meal. You already know what that is from the service. Pizza and Diet Coke. This menu is obviously the only appropriate choice. As you know, she used it for all important family events, and Beth was a wonderful cook, wasn't she? And she also, with Dean Closius, initiated the pizza at lunch at the law school, so she is responsible for many, many students getting midday sustenance. We will also, of course, have some candy out there in honor of Beth, wrapped, of course. And there are straws, because I think you know that Beth never, ever drank directly out of a bottle. So if you would like to use a straw, you may do so. I'd like to ask you to allow the family to exit the auditorium first. Will you be gathering in the crowd? Will you be in the crowd, or would you like to have a line where you talk to folks? Pardon me? In the crowd. Okay, so the family is going to be in the crowd, so let's all mingle, have a couple of pieces of pizza. By the way, you can also eat in the tables. There are tables in the SLK lounge, or there are chairs around there, so you can meet with the family in the forum. There are guest books available if you didn't get a chance to sign. I know the family would appreciate that. So again, I'm just going to ask that you allow the family to step out first, and then the rest of us can join them in the forum. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today to remember Beth. Thank you. We can clap for Beth. Let's clap for Beth.